Well, the Frankfurt mission covers the middle third or middle almost half of Germany. It's the middle of the two German missions, which is Berlin and the Alpine mission, and Frankfurt's just smack in the middle. We cover the German states of North Rhine-Westphalia, Hessen, all this other one down here that I can't remember, but it's right above Stuttgart. We don't go into Stuttgart. And then a bit of Bavaria, and we used to cover a bit of Thüringen, but not anymore. They annexed that into the Berlin mission. And I guess it's decently okay. There's a lot more people in the Frankfurt more central area because there's a lot of people that are part of the church offices in Europe, as well as just a lot of members in Frankfurt. They probably had the most. And then we also have a lot of actually American army bases where missionaries will serve in English-speaking areas. It's really interesting because sometimes they'll separate it into English or German-speaking areas just for that part. And you usually won't stay in an English area your whole mission, but it's just interesting seeing the difference between the church through Americans and the church through Germans. It's the same gospel, the same truth, but it's interesting how they both go about it. Religiously, the more south you go, the more Catholics you'll find. Probably the more north you go, the more, I guess, less religious people. And a lot of people are either born Catholic or Lutheran, Protestant, but a lot of people are usually around this. A lot of the people don't really practice as much as they used to, but it's mostly the younger generation that was really more interested in the gospel because it was something new, something that they were actually willing to listen to and learn about. Yeah, we've tried English classes before, and depending on what area you're in, sometimes it was better, sometimes it wasn't, and it was kind of a good way just to kind of find the people that were interested in learning English, and sometimes you could take them aside and ask them if they wanted to learn a little bit more about what we were doing as missionaries, what our church actually believed in. We actually had one area where we played basketball every Friday night. I don't always recommend that because sometimes people just get more caught up in the basketball. But we actually pulled a kid aside from basketball, and he ended up being baptized actually while I was there, and we taught him about the gospel. Kind of a funny thing about church history, apparently there was one building in Germany that they were building. It was in Dortmund, which is a stake up in the kind of middle. And when they were building the church back in the day, they said that they were trying to build this one specific, I think it was a chimney, and it had to be done at a certain time. And for most of the duration of the building, these three strange men appeared and helped out, and then they'd always leave. And then they'd always come back and help like the next day, and then they leave again, and no one ever knew who they were. So, all the German members are just saying that it's probably the three Nephites, and it was just kind of a cool little thing that someone brought up one day. Well, depending on where you are, there's anywhere, I think the smallest branch, I didn't serve there, but I'd heard about it, had, I think, somewhere between 6 to 10 actually active members. It was pretty small, and I heard most of them are actually women, and so they had a lot of missionaries, usually senior missionaries that would actually act as the branch president and as the counselors and stuff. And then there was anywhere from that to about, some of the American wards were anywhere between, 100, 200 people, which was pretty impressive. And then anywhere in the middle, a few wards I served in were anywhere between 80 to 90 active people actually attending church. Granted, in one area we served in, I guess I served in, with a guy, with a companion, but it was in Cologne, and there was we had probably about 24 pages on our ward list, but only about probably a total of 1 or 2 pages actually came to church. And so our job was trying to find out all the people that were actually still there, all the inactives. So usually have a decent active rate, but there's also a lot of inactives that just, for any reason, whether they're too far away from the church, health-wise, or maybe they've just kind of lost interest, or they've been offended in some way, they don't always come to church. So a lot of the time in Germany, people would just say they'd say, oh, die Mormonen mit Weiberei, which just means, oh, the Mormons, they have a lot of wives. They have polygamy and stuff. And we'd always be like, no, we don't. And depending on who we were talking to, if it was a guy, sometimes they'd be like, oh, that's a pity. It'd be nice, And I'm just thinking, no, it's not. I'm glad I could only deal with one woman personally, but that was one. And sometimes they'd be like, oh, you don't drink, or you don't. There's actually this one time we were helping out for this 5K at a university, me and my companion, and people were asking us, we said, oh, we're from America, it's me and him, we're here for about 2 years, and the guy says, oh, that's funny, you guys sound a lot like the Mormons. Then I said, well, we are Mormons. And he was just saying, well, no kidding. He didn't necessarily know no kidding. It was a little bit stronger language, but he just says, no kidding? And so we're like, yeah. And we talked about them We told them we don't drink coffee, and they said, well, I can understand that. Coffee's kind of unhealthy. Like, I like it, but I can see why. And then we'd say, well, we don't drink beer. And they said, well, you drink too much, you get drunk, I can understand that. And we're like, well, we don't do drugs, I think. And then he says, yeah. And he said, we don't have sex before marriage. And they all just stood there flabbergasted. And they said, what? Like, how? How do you do that? How do you live? And we're just saying, well, we know it's right. And we know that that's something that we kind of keep within matrimony. And for them, it just blew their minds, which was interesting. And sometimes people remembered that we also didn't do caffeine. Some people thought we were Amish. Some people, which was funny because usually I was on, we'd always make the joke. They'd ask, are you Amish? And, you turn around, you're on your cell phone. You're like, what? Because we had cell phones in my mission. But we were either the Amish or polygamous for the most part. So I started my mission in Herne, a little town over by Dortmund. And then I went to Offenbach, which is right next to Frankfurt. And then I went from there to Frankfurt. And then from Frankfurt up to Cologne, which is a pretty big city. And then from Cologne, I went to Ansbach, which is down by Nuremberg, really pretty. And then I went to Nuremberg, and Nuremberg was way pretty. So I served from August 2013 until August 2015.
Some of the coolest things about the Germany Frankfurt mission is that you are smack dab in the middle of Germany. So above you have the Berlin mission, below you have the Alpine German-speaking mission. And Frankfurt it's really, really long. There's as many people, it's really, really big. There's as many people in that mission as in the state of California. So 32 million people. And we have one mission to teach them also, 200-something missionaries. And California has a lot more than that. But another cool thing about the church there is that it is growing. Frankfurt now has 2 stakes, which it only had one when I got there. At the end of my mission, they split it into 2. There is a temple in Friedrichsdorf, which is about 45 minutes away from Frankfurt. And there's the church. Frankfurt is also the headquarters of the church in Europe. So you have a lot of different kinds of people living around Frankfurt who are working for the church, and it's from all parts of Europe, which is really cool. There's international wards and different kind of languages speaking wards. So there's a lot of unique opportunities there. I remember in the area there was a Spanish-speaking branch that was started as well. There are, I believe, 6 stakes, and there was one district at the time, which was East Germany, which has now been moved is now part of the Berlin mission. So not only is that area of Frankfurt, which I just described, very concentrated, the Frankfurt mission covers so much area that you really move out far beyond Frankfurt itself. So I served at the very top of the mission. I had friends who served at the very bottom of the mission. So the mission really goes all the way up to the highest point is Münster, which is where I served, and goes all the way to the French and Holland borders, and then goes over to the east and cuts off around East Germany, which are some parts are in the Frankfurt mission still, but a lot of it's been moved to the Berlin mission. And then the southern part goes all the way down to Karlsruhe, which is not too far, but a good distance from Stuttgart, which is in the Alpine German-speaking mission. There's about 12,000 members in the Frankfurt mission. About 5,000 of them are active. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of reactivation, a lot of retention to do. As far as baptisms per year go, I remember we were doing between 110 and 132, which is like a ward a year. So the work is maybe not progressing as fast as, say, Brazil or anywhere in South America, but it is progressing. And there's a lot of reactivation going on, and there are wards being developed and grown, and new stakes being created. The Lord is hastening His work, and you see that definitely in Germany. If you've been called to serve in Germany, any mission, I would recommend reading F. Enzio Busch's book, Searching for the Living God, because it really describes why the German people are the way they are now. And I'll explain how they are in a second. F. Enzio Busch, by the way, was very developed. Well, he's an Emeritus General Authority and mission president. And he did a lot to build the church in Dortmund, which is part of the Frankfurt mission, which is where I spent a lot of time. So Germans, because of World War II, have grown to be very skeptical of organizations and institutions and religion, any type of belief system, because they were affected so deeply by World War II and the Nazi regime. It's still there. You don't really talk about it, and you just don't. And it's starting to come out more and more 70 years later, but it's really interesting. It's kind of taboo to talk about World War II. It is still talked about, but it's not something you go around talking about with everybody you meet. Because of that, people will classify themselves as Catholic or evangelisch, Protestant, or Lutheran. There's basically only those two parties. It's Catholic and evangelisch, Protestant. But not a lot of people go to church unless it's Christmas or Easter. Then a lot of people go to church. They are very, very good at that. So you'll talk to a lot of people, and they'll always be able to tell you what they are, but the majority of people are not practicing their belief as far as going to church. Maybe they are spiritual and living things in their personal lives, but as far as church attendance, being involved with religious organization, it's very minimal. There's also, because of, especially in Germany, I've heard this similar in other parts of the world, and I'm not trying to speak bad about any other religious organization, just to explain why people are the way they are. The Jehovah's Witnesses have been very aggressive in Germany, and door to door, and they don't. A big problem has been that they haven't respected people's beliefs or when people have said no, and so it's really become a derogatory term to be a Jehovah's Witness in Germany. And again, I'm not speaking ill of them, but the problem is then it carries over to the missionaries, who then kind of receive that brand as Jehovah's Witnesses. So we were confused for them all the time and also treated as such. And they really just don't trust institutions and organizations because of their past and because of things that have carried on. So as far as also what you talked about, things I wish I'd done better to help be a good missionary, bring people back, and teach. So there's a couple things. The key to missionary work is relationships with members, and relationships with people in general. If you want to be a good missionary, you need to learn how to love people no matter what they do and who they are, and be their friend. Missionary work is friendship. And one must be able to teach members and others how to do the same. And one of the best ways to do that is by being an example of that yourself. Members will have more power to move the work along than you do, because there's more of them, and they know more about the people that you're going to be working with than you do. And so if you will be able to pray and ask Heavenly Father what members you need to work with and become their friends. And that doesn't mean going over and chilling at their house. That means being involved with them, planning activities and events where they can invite people into their own home, and where the members can befriend these less active people, and people investigating the church. That is where you will have success. If you try to do it on your own, you will not be successful. So 1, relationships. Learn how to build and create relationships and enable other people to do the same. 2, you're going to hear this all the time. You're going to start rolling your eyes about it, maybe even before you get in the MTC, or before you leave the MTC. There is power in obedience. And as you seek to do what is right and what you know deep down is right, you will be enabled to help other people. something I learned though as well, that if you were to do every single thing that we were expected to do in that little Missionary White Handbook, you wouldn't be able to do a ton. Why are you there? What is the purpose? It's to bring people to Christ. And something one of my companions, Elder Blackley, taught me was that people are the reason why we're there, and to help them and to love them. And they come first. And you do what you can to help them. And as you do, and do it the Lord's way, you will see success. There are times on your mission when you are done and you don't want to go farther. You're tired. You're beaten down. You're not having success. And I think another key to that is to just take a step back and say, Heavenly Father, I'm losing desire. And it's hard. This is hard. I need help. And He can grant you that desire. Just always turn to Heavenly Father, because you can't. It's His work, and you won't be able to do anything without His help, because all you are is a vessel. And it's great that you're there because you are a vessel, but He is the one providing that power, that spirit, and everything else that you have. I served from August 2012 to August 2014, and I served in Usingen, which was actually right by the temple, which was awesome. We got to go once every transfer for the 6 months I was there, and our ward building was actually right by the temple too, which was neat. So every Sunday I just got to go see the temple. And then I went to Dusseldorf, which was a major change. Usingen was like a bunch of small villages, like my trainer had described, and rolling hills. It was so beautiful. Sometimes we would be driving along, we had to like get out and take a picture of the sunset. it was unreal. Then I went to Dusseldorf, which is a city of about 500, 600,000. That was a major change. Imagine going from farm country to, a bigger city, bigger than I'd ever been in. Well, not visited, but lived in. And that was a major change. But it's also really neat because you dealt with a lot of different cultures and people there. And then I went to Munster, which was a city about 300,000, and it was a city with tons of students. It was like 80,000 students. And it was a beautiful city. In like 2005 or something, it was ranked one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So it's also known as the bike city. There's like 3 bikes per person there. So it was really neat as well. Fun to ride bikes there. Oh. I only served in 3 areas. Oh, okay. So I was in Usingen for 6 months, Dusseldorf for 6 months, and Munster for a year.
The Frankfurt, Germany mission is in the middle of Germany. It's kind of the middle strip of land. And the Berlin mission's above it, and the Munich mission, or the Alpine German speaking, I guess it's called, is below it. And there's quite a few people in Germany, about 85 million. Not sure how many live exactly in our mission, but quite a few. And there's a couple areas. There's kind of the Frankfurt area, which is kind of the southwestern kind of side of the mission, and there's a lot of people there. And then there's a place called the Ruhrgebiet, which is like the most concentrated population area of Germany, and that's kind of in the northern area of the mission. The northwest. And then East Germany is pretty sparsely populated, actually, in the areas that we have. There is Nuremberg in the south, which is kind of cool. A lot of history in that city. The northeast side, there's a lot of history there too, just not as many people. I served in a city called Weimar, or Weimar, if you want to be American, and there's a lot of history there. A lot of poets lived there, and Johann Sebastian Bach, if you know who he is. Martin Luther had a house there, and Goethe and Schiller lived there. As well as Adolf Hitler. He had a kind of a summer home there. It's now a now where you go shopping as a missionary. So if you ever serve in Weimar, go check it out.
Germany's incredible. So the Berlin mission covers from the border to the border, and then about halfway through the country, all the way up to Denmark. So it's a very big mission. It covers what was East Germany, where the Berlin Wall was, and then it also covers all of West Germany. With in terms of people that live there, I mean, Germany is just like a pothole, a melting pot. Like, you'll find every religion there, you'll find every race, nationality there. And, it's just this giant melting pot, which makes it a lot of fun too. In terms of the church, I mean, there's so much church history there. When the Berlin Wall came up and the DDR was established, the saints in East Germany were cut off from the church and relied solely upon basically the ministry of Elder Thomas S. Monson at the time, who visited the country several times. They weren't allowed to preach. They weren't allowed to invite friends. They weren't allowed to really do anything. They were watched very closely by government security and such. So it made it very difficult. They were completely separated, completely. They couldn't. At first, they couldn't build churches. The temple wasn't there. But it's incredible to look back on that history and see how that changed. The hand of the Lord and the ministry of President Monson, who made it possible for missionaries to enter the East Germany. They were able to build churches. They were able to build a temple, which was unheard of. Things that government never would have allowed. The members there, I mean, have been through the fire, have been through the thick, and because of that, they are very devoted. Some members that are so devoted because they had to be. They had to choose, and they chose to choose. They chose Jesus Christ. They chose to follow what they knew was right, and because of that, they're strong. The church is growing there. It is growing, maybe not as fast as other places in the world, but it is growing and it's thriving. And yes, Germany is changing. It is. It really depends on the area. West Germany it's usually in a lot of ways stronger than it is in East Germany when it comes to size. There's still districts in the mission. I believe there's 2 districts still. They just combined a district with a stake, which is great. The areas that I served in, I started in Berlin, in Marzahn, the area was called, which was a ward. I then moved to Annaberg, which was also a ward. Leipzig was my next city, was a ward, and Dresden was my last city, which was also a ward. They were the wards in Leipzig, Dresden, and Marzahn. They were all, I would say, between 60, 80, 100 people, kind of depending. And the Annaberg was about 40 people. But they were all wards. There are branches, but for the most part, it's pretty strong in terms of stakes and wards and such. I think total memberships around, I think it's like 50,000 in the country. So if I remember, don't quote me on that, but I think that's what it is. So we saw every religion. I taught people who were Muslim. I taught people that were Protestant. We call them Evangelisch, Catholic, Katholisch. You see everything, but I think mostly the country, Germans themselves are atheists, which was very difficult to teach. That was very difficult. Another religion you'll come in contact with a lot is the Jehovah's Witnesses, and people will think that you're Jehovah's Witnesses as you're out on the street, which was difficult because they already had this, this misconception of us, which was completely wrong. So it was hard to overcome that. I served from May 2012 to May 2014.